Hello everybody, welcome back to another Oscar prediction video where today I will be taking a look at the category of Best Director. It's funny, even though Best Director is considered one of the top categories, most of the time when I do these predictions, I do Director as one of the first ones, because Director is actually very rarely a surprise. And even when there's a little bit of hesitation regarding the Best Picture race, the director race is usually pretty predictable. And I think in this race, a lot of people have said that Best Picture is over and done with. And even if you want to make an argument that that's not true, that something else could come up in picture, I think director, nothing else could win. There is one very clear winner who I will be discussing in a moment. But first, fifth most likely to win is Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. Now, first and foremost, I just want to say that this is another one of those categories where the number one is so far ahead, it really does not matter what order I put 2 through 5 in. But Justine Triet, this is her first nomination, and the movie's up for Best Picture and a lot of awards. I think people are surprised by how well liked the film was by the Academy, and I think it could do potentially well in screenplay or actress, but I think the director nomination is just a show of support for the film. And because when you actually look at what she does and the film as a whole, it's probably the least flashy direction of the 5 nominees. Not to say that it's bad work, I think it suits the material very, very well, but and I will say, of the 2 international films in this category, I think Anatomy of a Fall is going to do better in Best Picture than the other international film, but I think the other film has more flashier direction. And also, Justine Triet is not really a known director. For a lot of people, this is going to be the first film of hers that they've seen, so I think this is a good nomination. I'm very happy that we did not get an all-male lineup in Best Director, but I think a lot of people would easily switch her out for Greta Gerwig or Celine Song. Again, very notable work, but I think of this lineup, it's probably going to get the least amount of votes. Fourth most likely to win is Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. Now, this is also Jonathan Glazer's first nomination, and as said before, this is a director that is a little bit more well-known than Triet, because he's done stuff like Under the Skin and Birth, and his name is a little bit more familiar to Oscar voters. On top of that, the direction itself is very, very flashy, maybe the most flashiest. Well, you can debate it with some of the other names in this category, but most people have probably never seen a movie that's quite like Zone of Interest, and specifically like an Oscar bait movie, because there's been a million Holocaust movies, and this is looking at that time period in such a different way from what we're used to seeing. And so, yeah, without getting into the specifics of what they do, it's certainly really eye-catching stuff. However, I don't think that the movie is going to go very far in picture. I think it's going to win international, and we'll see if it wins anything else, but I do think the direction is just, yeah, it's flashy, it's bold, but because the movie is so experimental, by its very nature, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And while a lot of people appreciate what Jonathan Glazer did on the film, I don't think it's going to be enough to take down some of the bigger contenders in this race. Third most likely to win is Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things. So, this is Yorgos Lanthimos' second nomination after The Favorite, and his movies tend to be very out there, and some people love his movies and some people hate them, but it's interesting that he's only been able to find big award success when he's not writing his own screenplays. And some of his movies, like Dogtooth or Killing of a Sacred Deer, have been incredibly bold. maybe a little bit too out there for certain Academy voters, and this movie is just out there enough that people like it and people are responding to it. However, there's definitely going to be people that are turned off by the direction and are turned off by the weird wide angle lenses and the weird looking sets and just the whole premise of the story, or even just the amount of sex in the film. There's enough things about the movie to be a turnoff to certain people, even though a lot of people are also really responding to the film. And it is interesting, considering the amount of discourse with the Greta Gerwig snub, that no one really brought up this movie as a counterpoint to that, because both Barbie and Poor Things are kind of this genre-y take on women's liberation and on defying the patriarchy and all that. But Poor Things really does feel like it's seen through the male lens in a way that I personally think kind of hurts the movie. I mean, male director, male screenwriter, based on a book by a male author. I feel like there should have been a few more women behind the scenes to make sure that this story I don't know, I think compared to Barbie, it doesn't ring quite as true for me personally, and I've seen a few people express similar sentiments. So while the direction is certainly very flashy and certainly very showy, it's just not the sort of thing that I think is going to win. I admire that there are a lot of people that like the movie and like the direction, but I don't think Lanthimos is going to win in this category. I'm sorry. Second most likely to win is Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon. So, Martin Scorsese, obviously Oscar-winning director, been nominated a bunch of times. And this particular, I believe he's actually the oldest director ever nominated for an Oscar. So he's a legend, undeniably, which people are going to want to vote for him based on that alone. But much like Yorgos Lanthimos, he has gotten a little bit of flack for, there's this question of, is he the right person to tell this story? A story that should focus so much on the Native American characters and instead focuses more on the white characters, and there's been some discourse surrounding that. And honestly, the more time has passed and the more I've sat on this movie, the more I really do appreciate what Scorsese was trying to do. Because even if he isn't the perfect person who should be telling the story, nobody else was telling the story. And the story was known, but no one was really bringing it to the mainstream attention until Scorsese adapted this book. And I do think Scorsese, especially in the final scene, he is acknowledging the fact that he should not be the person telling the story, but hopefully now that he has, more paths open up. And I'm not going to get too into it, but I do think this is a very well-directed film, if a flawed film. But here's the thing, though. Scorsese already has an Oscar. He's not necessarily overdue, even though he is a legend and could probably stand to win another one. The movie itself is well-liked, but has been kind of trailing in popularity. It missed some key nominations, including lead actor and screenplay. So, while I think it's possible that... You know what? Yeah, I think Scorsese's number 2, but I don't think he has the passion to overcome number 1 most likely to win, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer. So, I was kind of resistant to this for a while, but now I think it's pretty much undeniable. Christopher Nolan, for a very long time, was the internet's favorite director, especially when he had the 1-2 punch of The Dark Knight and Inception. There was all of this talk about how creative he was and how brilliant he was and how much he uses practical effects and the way that he tells his stories. And I think that maybe died down a little bit with stuff like Dark Knight Rises and Tenet. But this movie, a lot of people are saying, is one of his better films. And even though the Barbenheimer phenomenon is what got enough people interested in seeing the film, so many people are coming back to it, and are coming back to revisit a 3-hour biopic that's partially in black and white. And that really does speak to Nolan's status as a director and what he's able to do within the boundaries of the film. And even though I think the film has problems, namely in the way the female characters are portrayed, there is something about it that keeps people coming back. And the fact that Christopher Nolan is considered this legend in the industry and he has never won an Oscar, that I think is giving people incentive to vote for him. And I think there's a lot of people that really, really want to see Christopher Nolan win this Oscar. And so, as of right now, Oppenheimer is the frontrunner in picture, and Nolan has already won DGA, Critics' Choice, BAFTA, Golden Globe. He's basically won everything major, and so, yeah, it would be pretty shocking for him to lose. Even if Oppenheimer were to somehow lose picture, I cannot see Nolan losing director. So, thank you very much for watching, and tune in tomorrow where I will be taking a look at the category of Best Original Score. See you then.